This is the Analysis in Change with Nathan Williams and Neil Kieran.
Welcome to Analysis in Chains. I'm Nathan Williams. Neil isn't around today. His children are sick. Children often get sick, and so I am on my own today. I was thinking of what would be interesting to talk about, and it occurs to me that there are a lot of things that I find really interesting, a lot of things about how blockchain works, how certain aspects work, that may not be inherently obvious. And I remember early on when I was looking at different applications of blockchain, and I got really confused as to how they could apply to certain areas. And one of the big areas is data self-sovereignty. So this idea that I can own my own data, this idea that I can use blockchain to somehow create my own wallet of data or my own identity card or my own health records and maintain control of it and no one else can see it. And this is a bit of a mind bend if you start thinking about how this interacts with a blockchain at first. It's not intuitive. Why? Because how does a blockchain work? A blockchain works by having everyone who participates keep a copy of every transaction and everyone else's data. So if all the data is shared among hundreds or thousands of different computers that are all incentivized to keep track of everyone's transaction, how can that be used to keep my own data private so that I'm the only one who owns it? So the first type of data you might want to keep track of is data related to your identity. That's very personal data. It's self-sovereign, and it's data that certain people need access to. Maybe you need to access certain websites, or you need to access certain services, government services, what have you. And so there would be a transaction involved. The transaction is that I want to receive something for giving my data. You don't usually just give your data for no reason. And so the way the blockchain interacts with that is to keep track of the transaction and make sure that both parties have met their obligation. Now, a transaction could just be, I'm selling my data. I give you my data, you give me money. And there's a number of places where this happens. One of my friends that we've had on the show before is the co-founder of the Gust Network, where they allow people to do job searches. You put up your public information, which is your skills, and you have your private information, which is encrypted. And then if someone wants to purchase it, there is a smart contract that will allow an exchange of crypto tokens in exchange for access to the data. And the smart contract gives the key so that the person can access the data and decrypt it. If the data is stored in a public space, then this sort of smart contract is needed to make sure that the money is actually given in exchange for the data without having a third party intermediate. All right, that's fairly straightforward. You have a key that opens some encrypted data that is stored encrypted but in a decentralized location. Makes sense. But it's not the blockchain itself that stores all of this data. And that's where often it gets confusing. The blockchain keeps track of transactions. Another example, we had a while back, I guess about a year ago, on the show, the founder of Limpo. Limpo is a blockchain solution for health, specifically about sports and fitness, that if you do certain fitness challenges, you get rewarded with tokens. Well, what is that? That is companies when companies sponsor a challenge, essentially they are giving money in exchange for your health data. What health data? The data on whether you exercised or not, and how many reps you did and how in shape you are. And and who you are. And so this is the exchange that's going on. Companies paying for your data. But it's not framed like that. It's framed as sponsoring a health event and advertising. But how does blockchain come into this? Again, it is an atomic swap, a smart contract that will distribute money in exchange for meeting certain criteria. The criteria are giving up your data that you've stored, including meeting the requirements of the challenges using something like a Fitbit. Okay, what else? What about medical records? Again, this is a type of exchange. It's not a financial transaction necessarily, but let's say you wanted to give certain access to your medical information to a doctor at various hospitals. You would have a decentralized database with your personal data, your medical history, stored in certain areas, and maybe it would be segmented according to what type of information it is. Maybe some types of doctors don't need to see the same information as an insurance company. So your data is segmented according to who gets to see it or according to permissions, and then the keys are given out or transacted to the appropriate parties for a certain amount of time as you're allowed. And how does the blockchain play into this? It keeps a record of the transaction. So ultimately, these are systems for giving access to information that are built on top of a blockchain layer. The blockchain layer keeps track of the transaction of who received the key to access the correct information, who received the monetary rewards, if appropriate, or what have you, and keeps all that data immutable so it can never be changed. And then the data layer is just completely separate. And this is what we did actually in my company, MindSpider, where we're keeping track of certificates for responsibly sourced raw materials. You create a certificate, which is a data layer, which will have audits and reports, and that's linked to an amount of material that it's good for on the blockchain. So you have your blockchain layer, which keeps track of it's a ton of metal, it's a half a ton of metal, and that's linked to this separate data layer. So you know that the data layer is owned by a certain person. You keep track of the transaction, and it's built separately from the blockchain. So it's just a little counterintuitive, but these are the sort of things that you want to think of when you're designing a system. How can I take a system where data is normally trusted to someone else or used by someone else, and how can I reclaim ownership of that data? How can I make that data self-sovereign? What field are you in? What data do you see held by a third party where perhaps they shouldn't be trusted with that data? What data would you like to see reclaimed or made self-sovereign? Tell us on Telegram. Join us. We have an Analysis in Chains Telegram. We'd love to see you there. It's a lively group, and I'm hanging on there, and we can chat about blockchain applications all the livelong day. I know it's a short episode today, but Neil will be back soon. We've got interviews at the end of the week and next week, and so keep on tuning in. It was good to hang out just you and me. Sometimes it's nice to do that for a change, and until next time, keep on hashing.